Well, commodity prices still remain the biggest uncertainty. We've seen this flurry of tariffs and reactions to tariffs, which of course creates global fragmentation in supply chains, and that stimulates market uncertainty. So unsurprisingly, commodity prices remain very volatile and uncertain. We also saw two action priorities around affordability. We're still in the middle of a cost of living crisis in many countries across the world, and around the role of transmission and grids. We tend to talk an awful lot about supply-side dynamics. How much oil is there? How many renewables are there? How much generation capacity is being built? But we tend to forget that actually it's about the uses of energy and the value that energy generates. And for energy to be used, you've got to connect supply with demand. And you've got to think about who's going to pay the system costs, not just the supply costs.
Indeed, and one of the reasons I always enjoy having you on and why this is a great conversation is because you look at energy beyond the lens of just the price of oil. But before we move on to that, I did want to get your take on where oil is right now, because we are still stuck at around $65 a barrel. What does that tell you about sentiment in the energy space today, particularly in traditional energy like crude oil flows?
Well, first of all, it tells us that the energy future is uneven but not unintentional. And we have to think about the future of energy not just in terms of the electrification supercycle that everybody's getting very excited about, but the fact that by 2050, or for decades to come, half a much bigger world energy system is still going to rely on liquid fuels and oil. So when the oil price varies and fluctuates, it's a pain point for countries who depend on that as income, but it also changes the dynamic across every other energy system. So oil prices come down globally, and then that affects gas and renewable investments internationally. And so you see swings and roundabouts across. It's not siloed, it's not a protection, it's like a web of different connections. So when oil moves, renewables, transmission, all parts of the energy system move as well.
And that's what makes this so important as well, because if you look at this for our region in particular, 65 USD is still below really important break-evens, like in Saudi Arabia, for example. It's also below break-evens for some parts of US shale. How concerned are you by that?
Well, I don't think it's not a shortage of supply. We're not like back in the 1974s and there's some form of supply-side crisis. It really is about the fact that we're not just seeing a rewiring of electrification, we're seeing a rewiring of trust. The tariffs are rewiring trust. Deals are happening everywhere. The reality is we have an energy-thirsty planet. And the number one issue these days for all governments is energy security. And energy security comes in many different shapes and forms today, but actually global markets have been a big part of energy security stories. And so if you take global trade out of the equation, it makes much greater uncertainty on the security side, and that all affects the affordability and the sustainability dimensions.
So what's your read on Trump's decision to delay these EU tariffs and the trade war that we see unfolding between the US and China, and indeed US vis-a-vis the rest of the world with these 10% tariff allocations? What does it mean for the energy patch in your view?
So what we did last year was we were looking at the general picture, the bigger structural changes, and we changed the World Energy Scenario Foundations. We have a set of scenarios that are called a future of rocks and a future of rivers. And you know that if you throw enough rocks, you can block a river. But you also know that new rivers can form and flow around the biggest of obstacles, and that's what we're seeing in this rewiring of trust. Some countries are definitely looking at the rocks world, some are looking at the rivers world, some are looking at how do they navigate rocks and rivers, because all life grows in the space in between. And the opportunities are not rocks or rivers, they're the new human potentialities of this next energy wave. And that next energy wave is going to be increasingly electrified, but it's going to have a lot of clean material and energy friends to get to scale.